My parents sold the home I restored, giving every penny to my brother, George, claiming I didn't need help. 7 years later, George vanished with the cash, leaving them homeless. They came begging to me, unaware I secretly own the very building they were just evicted from. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss the twist coming up. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Have you ever been punished for being the responsible sibling? Let us know in the comments. I was lying on my sofa, a damp washcloth pressed over my eyes, trying to will away the migraine that had been blinding me for 3 days. It wasn't just a headache. It was the physical manifestation of burnout. I had just launched my own landscape architecture firm, a dream I'd clawed my way toward for a decade, and the stress had finally caught up with me. My body felt like lead, and the silence of my small apartment was the only medicine I could afford. Then the doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite chime, it was a persistent, demanding buzz that didn't stop until I dragged myself upright. When I opened the door, squinting against the hallway light, I found my parents, Alfred and Margaret, standing there. They didn't look concerned about my pale face or the dark circles under my eyes. They looked excited, vibrant even. "Isabella, wake up! We have news!" My father, Alfred, boomed, pushing past me without waiting for an invitation. He was a retired factory foreman, a man who believed volume was a substitute for authority. My mother, Margaret, fluttered in behind him, clutching her purse with a nervous, giddy energy. "Oh, stop it, Al. She looks terrible. But yes, Isabella, you really need to sit down for this." I closed the door, the thumping in my head intensifying. "Mom, Dad, I really can't do this today. I think I have the flu, or maybe it's just exhaustion. Can we?" "We sold the house," Alfred announced, cutting me off as he sat in my favorite armchair. I froze. What? The house. The sprawling, Victorian-era farmhouse on the edge of town. The house that had been falling apart 10 years ago until I spent my weekends repointing the brick. I replanted the gardens, and I paid for the new roof with my first few years of savings because they claimed they were on a fixed income. "We sold it," Margaret said, beaming. "Cash offer, over market value. We close in 2 weeks." My stomach turned. "But where will you go? That house has been in the family for 3 generations. I put so much work into that place." "We're downsizing," Alfred said dismissively, waving a hand as if erasing my labor from history. "Renting a condo. It's time to enjoy our retirement." "Okay," I said slowly, trying to process the betrayal of them selling it without even telling me, but trying to be happy for them. "If it makes your lives easier, I understand. The equity should set you up comfortably for the rest of your lives." Alfred and Margaret exchanged a look. It was a look I knew well, the conspiratorial glance of 2 people who had justified the unjustifiable. "Well, that's the thing," Alfred said, clearing his throat. "We aren't keeping the money, Isabella." "What?" "We're giving it to George," Margaret said, her voice dropping to a reverent whisper. "He has this incredible opportunity, a tech startup in California. He just needs seed capital. If he gets this money, he says he'll triple it in a year. We're investing in his future." George, my younger brother, the man who was 34 years old and had never held a job for longer than 6 months. George, who had borrowed my car and totaled it. George, who had stolen from my grandmother's purse at her funeral. "You're giving him everything," I whispered, my voice trembling. "The entire sale price? That's nearly $500,000. Dad, that's your retirement. That's your safety net." "George needs it," Alfred snapped, his jovial mood vanishing the moment I questioned the golden child. "He has potential, Isabella. He just hasn't had his break yet." "And what about me?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. It wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. "I paid for the roof. I did the landscaping. I helped you pay the property taxes 3 years in a row when the pension was short." Margaret sighed, walking over to pat my arm with a condescending pity that made my skin crawl. "Oh, Isabella, look at you. You have your own business. You're smart. You're tough. You don't need our help. You never have. George isn't like you, he needs a leg up. He doesn't need a leg up, Mom, he needs to grow up, I shouted, the pain in my head exploding. Enough, Alfred stood up, his face reddening. It is our money, and we have decided. We didn't come here to ask for permission. We came to tell you so you could help us pack. We need you there on Saturday at 6:00 a.m. I looked at them, really looked at them. I saw the selfishness etched into their aging faces. They didn't see a daughter standing in front of them, they saw a resource. A safety net they could ignore because they assumed it would always be there. No, I said. The silence that followed was heavy and cold. Excuse me, Alfred growled. No, I won't help you pack, and if you give that money to George, if you liquidate your future for one of his scams, do not call me when it goes wrong. You selfish, ungrateful girl, Margaret spat, her sweet facade melting instantly. We raised you, we fed you, and you begrudge your brother his chance at success. I begrudge you throwing your lives away, I said, opening the door. Please leave. Alfred walked to the door, stopping to look back at me with a sneer I would never forget. Fine, we don't need you. We have George. He's going to be a millionaire, and when he is, don't you dare come crawling to us asking for a dime. You're out of the will, Isabella. Everything goes to the son who actually respects his parents. They walked out, leaving me standing in the hallway, shivering from fever and shock. I closed the door and slid down against it until I hit the floor, the physical pain of my illness eclipsed entirely by the hollow ache in my chest. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. The next few months were a blur of muted agony. I didn't speak to them, but I couldn't escape the fallout. In a small town, news travels fast, and my parents made sure their version of the story was the one everyone heard. I would go to the grocery store and see family friends, people who had known me since I was a toddler, duck into other aisles to avoid me. I received a scathing letter from an aunt I hadn't seen in 5 years, telling me that jealousy is a sin and that I should be ashamed for trying to sabotage my brother's dreams. It hurt. God, it hurt. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation. Had I been selfish? Was I wrong to be angry that my labor on the house was being cashed out to fund George's gambling addiction masked as entrepreneurship? But then the practicality of my nature kicked in. I am a landscape architect. My job is to look at a chaotic, overgrown mess, visualize the structure beneath, and impose order. I deal with drainage, with foundation, with long-term survival. I knew, with mathematical certainty, that the structure my parents were building was doomed to collapse. About 3 months after the sale, I ran into George. I was at a coffee shop, reviewing blueprints for a new city park project, when he sauntered in. He looked expensive. He was wearing a designer leather jacket that still creased stiffly, a watch that was too big for his wrist, and sunglasses indoors. Izzy, he called out, his voice loud enough to turn heads. He walked over, grinning that charming, lopsided grin that had gotten him out of trouble since kindergarten. Long time no see, you look tired. I'm working, George, I said, not looking up from my schematics. Always working, he laughed, pulling out a chair and sitting down uninvited. That's your problem. You think small. You grind away for pennies while the visionaries change the world. Is that what you're doing? Changing the world? I asked, finally meeting his eyes. Behind the sunglasses, I could see the glint of arrogance, but also the jittery energy of someone who was riding a high that wasn't sustainable. You bet, we're in pre-seed funding right now. The app is going to revolutionize logistics. Mom and Dad are going to retire on a yacht, Izzy, a yacht. And you, well, maybe I'll hire you to mow the lawn of my estate. He chuckled, leaning back. They told me you tried to stop the sale. That was low, even for you. I tried to stop them from being homeless in 5 years, I said calmly. Homeless? He barked a laugh. I just bought a condo for them, paid the lease up for a full year. They're living like kings, we're untouchable. He stood up, tapping the table with his knuckles. You know, Dad was right, you've always been jealous. It's sad, really. Anyway, I've got a flight to catch. Zurich calls. He didn't have a flight to Zurich. I knew that because I noticed the tag on his designer bag was a knockoff, and the expensive watch was ticking loudly, a telltale sign of a cheap quartz movement disguised as an automatic. As he walked away, strutting like a peacock, a cold resolve settled over me. He thought he had won. He thought the game was over because he held the chips right now. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I wasn't just a gardener. I worked in development. I knew every zoning law, every property manager, and every real estate holding company in the tri-state area. I knew how to track assets, and more importantly, I knew how to track liabilities. I picked up my phone and dialed a number. "Hey, Sarah," I said to my friend who worked at the county clerk's office. "I need you to pull some public records for me. I need to know exactly who owns the building my parents just moved into. And I need to know if there are any liens on a George Bennett." I didn't react with rage anymore. I began to document. I started a file on my computer named The Collapse. If they were going to write me out of the family narrative, I was going to be the one holding the pen when the final chapter was written. To understand why George's betrayal stung so deeply, you have to understand the years leading up to it. When I was 22, freshly graduated and drowning in student loans, Dad fell off a ladder at the factory. He shattered his hip and was out of work for 18 months. Disability payments barely covered the grocery bill, let alone the mortgage. George was 18 then, perfectly healthy, and spent his days playing video games and smoking weed in the basement. I didn't have a choice. I moved back home. I worked 2 jobs, one at a nursery during the day, one bartending at night. I handed over 70% of my paycheck to Margaret every Friday. I paid the mortgage. I paid the heating bill. I paid for George's internet so he wouldn't throw a tantrum. I did this for 3 years. When Dad went back to work, there was no thank you. There was just a suggestion that I should move out because they wanted their space back. I left without a fight, proud that I had saved the family home. I thought that sacrifice meant something. I thought it bought me loyalty. I was a fool. Now, 7 years post-disinheritance, the picture of what George was doing became clear. My file on him had grown thick. George wasn't a businessman, he was a mimic. He could talk the talk. He read all the hustle culture blogs, used words like synergy and scalability, and dressed the part. But beneath the surface, there was a vacuum. The tech startup he had pitched to my parents didn't exist. There was no business license filed. No LLC. The money from the house sale, $450,000, had been deposited into a personal checking account in George's name. From there, the paper trail was a roadmap of narcissism. $60,000 on a luxury car lease, prepaid. $25,000 on a consulting trip to Vegas. $15,000 on custom suits. And thousands upon thousands withdrawn in cash at ATMs near casinos. He wasn't investing, he was role-playing a millionaire. But the most insidious part was how he treated our parents. I monitored their social media from a burner account. George would post photos of them at fancy dinners with captions like, "Treating the rents, blessed success." He made it look like he was showering them with gifts. In reality, he was isolating them. I ran into a neighbor of theirs, Mrs. Gable, at the supermarket one afternoon. She didn't know I had been disowned. "Oh, Isabella," she chirped. "I saw your mother the other day. She looks tired. She said George is handling all their finances now. She wanted to buy a new winter coat, but said she had to ask George for approval first." My blood ran cold. He had taken their autonomy. He had convinced them that since he was the investment manager, he needed to control the cash flow. Alfred, the man who used to scream if I touched the thermostat, was now begging his son for pocket money. And then, the antagonist showed his true face to me directly. It was Christmas, 4 years into the estrangement. I received a text from an unknown number. It was a picture of my parents sitting in a sterile, modern living room, looking older and smaller than I remembered. They were holding up a sign that said "Merry Christmas to our successful son." The text following it read, "They don't miss you. They don't even talk about you. I'm the favorite, Izzy, always have been. Stop asking Sarah at the clerk's office about me. I know what you're doing. You're just jealous that I'm the one who's going to inherit the kingdom. Back off, or I'll make sure Mom and Dad cut you off from the rest of the extended family too." He didn't know. He thought I was just snooping out of spite. He didn't realize that I wasn't looking for a way back in. I was looking for the expiration date. Because I had found something interesting about the condo my parents were living in. George hadn't bought it, despite what he told me. He was leasing it. An expensive, high-end lease in a building that was currently undergoing a change in management. The owner of the building was a client of mine. A developer who was looking to liquidate some of his smaller residential assets to fund a massive commercial project I was designing. "I need to sell the East Side complex," the developer had told me over lunch. "It's a headache. I just want it off the books." "I'll buy it," I had said, my pulse hammering in my ears. He laughed. "It's a dumpy 4-unit building. Why do you want that?" "Investment property," I lied, "and I have the capital." I did have the capital. My firm had taken off. I lived frugally. I had vet aggressively, driven by a fear of ending up like my parents, dependent and foolish. I bought the building under an opaque LLC named Nemesis Holdings. George continued to pay the rent for my parents, using my parents' own money, sending the checks to a P.O. box in the city. He had no idea that for the last 2 years, he had been writing checks to his sister. But the checks were starting to arrive late, first by a few days, then a week. Then last month the check bounced. The notification arrived on a Tuesday morning. A sterile, automated email from my business banking app. Transaction returned, insufficient funds, account ending in 8890. It was the rent check for Unit 4B my parents' unit. I sat in my office, the morning sun filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline, a view I had earned through 80-hour work weeks and relentless discipline. My finger hovered over the mouse. For years, I had waited for this moment. I had bought the building 2 years ago to ensure that when the inevitable crash happened, I would be the one controlling the wreckage, not buried under it. But now that it was here, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a cold, sharp clarity. The structure was failing. I picked up the phone and dialed the property management firm I used as a buffer. They knew me only as the representative for Nemesis Holdings, and I paid them extra to ensure my name never appeared on any paperwork sent to the tenants. "This is Isabella," I said when the account manager, Mr. Henderson, answered. "Regarding Unit B." "Ah, yes, we just got the alert, Ms. Bennett," the check bounced. "Do you want us to resubmit it? Sometimes it's just a timing issue." "No," I said, my voice steady. "Issue a 3-day notice to pay or quit, immediately." "A 3-day, that's aggressive, isn't it? They've been reliable for 2 years." "They haven't been reliable," I corrected. "They've been lucky. Send the notice. And Mr. Henderson, I want a full inspection of the unit scheduled for next week. Site maintenance review. I want to know the condition of the asset." I hung up. The clock had started. I couldn't just rely on the bounced check, though. A bounced check could be a mistake. I needed to know the depth of the rot. If George was missing rent payments, it meant the well was dry. It meant the $450,000 was gone. I opened my laptop and pulled up the contact for a forensic accountant I had used during a messy partnership dispute years ago. I didn't need a forensic audit, though. I needed a digital bloodhound. I sent him the dossier I had compiled on George, his social media handles, his known associates, and the routing number from the bounced check. "Find him," I typed. "Find where the money went." 3 days later, the report came back. It was worse than I had imagined. I sat in a quiet corner of a bistro, reading the PDF on my tablet. The accountant had traced George's investments. There was no tech startup. There was no portfolio. George had funneled nearly $200,000 into a cryptocurrency exchange that had collapsed 6 months ago. He had lost another $100,000 on sports betting apps, small wagers at first, then escalating into five-figure desperate throws to win back his losses. The rest had been burned on the lifestyle facade. The lease on the luxury SUV, bottle service at clubs to impress people who didn't care about him, and loans to friends who had vanished. But the kicker was the credit card debt. George had taken out 3 credit cards in my father's name. Alfred Bennett, a man who had prided himself on never carrying a balance in his life, was currently sitting on $45,000 of high-interest debt he likely didn't even know existed. I closed the tablet, feeling sick. George hadn't just wasted their money, he had stolen their identity. He had hollowed them out from the inside, leaving nothing but a thin shell that was about to crack. I looked out the window and saw a familiar figure walking down the street. It was my mother. She looked smaller. Her coat was the same one she'd worn 5 years ago, now fraying at the cuffs. She was walking with a slight limp, carrying 2 heavy grocery bags from a discount store. She stopped at a bench to rest, wiping sweat from her forehead. This was the woman who had told me I was selfish. This was the woman who had cut me out of her will. I watched her struggle to stand back up, her knees popping, and for a fleeting second I wanted to run out there and help her. I wanted to grab the bags and drive her home, but I forced myself to stay seated. If I stepped in now, I would just be enabling the lie. If I saved them before the crash, they would never see George for who he really was. They would just blame bad luck and expect me to foot the bill while George walked away unscathed. No, the collapse had to happen. I took a sip of my iced coffee, the bitterness matching the taste in my mouth. I had the leverage, the building, the debt reco. RDS, the truth. Now, I just had to wait for them to walk into the trap. The phone call came 2 days after the pay or quit notice was taped to their door. I was in a meeting with a supplier, discussing stone pavers for a municipal plaza, when my phone buzzed. Mom. I hadn't seen her name on my screen in 3 years. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it buzzed again. Dad. Then a text from Mom. Isabella, please, it's an emergency. I excused myself from the meeting and walked out to the quiet hallway. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and dialed my mother back. Isabella, her voice was shrill, laced with a panic I hadn't heard since I was a child. Oh, thank God, we have a situation. Hello, Margaret, I said coldly. I'm working, what do you want? Isabella, don't be like that, she snapped, old habits dying hard before her voice cracked. There's been a mistake, a clerical error, the bank, something happened with George's accounts. We got a letter, an eviction letter. An eviction letter? I feigned ignorance, my voice flat. I thought George bought that condo for you. That's what he told everyone. There was a heavy silence on the line. Well, yes, she stammered. He handles the payments. It's a lease-to-own arrangement, very complex, high finance. But the bank made a mistake with the transfer, and these landlords are vicious, Isabella. They want us out in 3 days. So call George, I said. If it's a bank error, he can clear it up in 5 minutes. He's traveling, she said, her voice trembling. He's in Dubai for a conference. We can't reach him, the time difference, the signal. He's not in Dubai, Mom, I said, cutting through the lie. What? I said, he's not in Dubai. I saw him checked in at the Sapphire Club downtown on social media 2 hours ago. You're lying, she hissed. You're always trying to tear him down. He's working. Okay, I said. Then wait for him to call you back. Good luck with the eviction. Wait, Isabella, she was crying now. We don't have the cash. The accounts are all tied up in his investments. We just need $2,500 to cover this month and the late fee until George gets back. We'll pay you back double. Please, your father is. His heart isn't good. I don't have it, I lied. I'm just a landscape architect, remember? I don't have high finance money. You ungrateful. I hung up. My hand was shaking, not from fear but from rage. Even now, facing homelessness, they lied for him. They protected him. I needed to speed this up. I left the office and drove to the address the Pi had given me for George's current location. It wasn't the Sapphire Club. That was a lie I told Mom to test her defense of him. He was actually at a dive bar on the south side of the city, a place where people went to disappear in the middle of the afternoon. I walked in. The air smelled of stale beer and desperation. George was sitting in a booth in the back, nursing a whiskey. He looked terrible. His designer jacket was scuffed, his face was puffy, and his eyes were bloodshot. I slid into the booth opposite him. He jumped, spilling some of his drink. "Izzy, what the hell are you doing here?" "Your check bounced, George," I said, placing the photocopy of the returned check on the sticky table between us. He stared at it, then let out a hollow laugh. "Wow, Mom called you already? Man," she panics fast, "it's just a liquidity issue. My assets are illiquid right now. I'm moving funds from an offshore." "Stop," I said. The word was a command, not a request. "Drop the act. There are no offshore accounts. There is no startup. You blew $200K on crypto and the rest on bad bets." His face went pale. How do you know that?" "I know everything," I said, leaning in. "I know about the credit cards in Dad's name. I know about the $45,000 debt you saddled them with. And I know you have exactly $300 left in your checking account." George's expression shifted from shock to a sneering, ugly anger. "So what? You stalking me now? You think you're better than me?" "I am better than you," I said simply, "because I didn't steal our parents' retirement." "They gave it to me," he shouted, drawing glances from the few other patrons. "They believed in me. Unlike you, you were always the boring one, the safe one. I took a shot." "You missed," I said, "and now they're being evicted." He waved a hand dismissively. "I'll fix it. I just need a bridge loan. Actually, since you're here, you're doing well, right? Loan me 10 grand. I have a lock on a parlays for this weekend. I can make it back, pay the rent, and—" "You are delusional," I whispered. "I'm not here to give you money. I'm here to give you a warning. You are going to go to them, and you are going to tell them the truth. Tonight." "Or what?" he sneered. "You'll tell on me. They won't believe you. They hate you, Izzy, remember." "Disinherited. They think you're poison." "They might not believe me," I agreed, a dark smile touching my lips. "But they'll believe the sheriff when he throws their furniture on the curb on Friday." "You're bluffing," George said, though his eyes darted nervously. "You don't care about them, but you won't let them go homeless. You have a savior complex." "Try me," I said. I stood up. "You have until Friday to fix this. If you don't, I will ruin you, George. I will hand that file to the district attorney." "You can't," he stammered. "It's a family matter." "It's fraud," I said, "and I'm not family anymore, remember." I walked out, leaving him staring at his empty glass. I knew he wouldn't tell them. He was a coward. He would run. And that was exactly what I needed him to do. Friday came. The eviction moratorium had expired. George hadn't paid. In fact, George had done exactly what I predicted. He had vanished. My phone had been silent for 2 days. No pleading texts from Mom, no angry voicemails from Dad. The silence was unnerving. I sat in my office, watching the clock tick toward 5:00 p.m. I had instructed the property manager to execute the lockout at noon. At 5:15 p.m., the receptionist buzzed me. "Ms. Bennett, there are 2 people here to see you. They don't have an appointment. They say they're your parents." I closed my eyes for a brief second. Here we go. "Send them back," I said. When the door opened, the sight of them punched the air out of my lungs. They looked like refugees. Dad was leaning heavily on a cane I'd never seen before, his face gray and unshaven. Mom was clutching a plastic garbage bag full of clothes, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen. They looked old, fragile, broken. They stood in the doorway of my sleek, modern office, looking out of place among the glass and steel. "Isabella," Dad rasped. His voice was no longer a boom, it was a croak. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the leather chairs opposite my desk. I didn't get up to hug them. I couldn't. They sank into the chairs. Mom wouldn't let go of the garbage bag. "He's gone," Mom whispered, staring at the floor. "Who?" I asked, though I knew. George, Dad said, a tear tracing a path through the stubble on his cheek. The sheriff came, at noon. They changed the locks. We tried to call George. His phone is disconnected. We went to his apartment. The superintendent said he moved out in the middle of the night on Wednesday. We have nowhere to go, Mom sobbed. We called your Aunt Linda, but she didn't answer. We sat in the car for 4 hours. We didn't know where else. I looked at them, truly looked at them. The arrogance was gone. The pride was dust. You told me I was out of the will, I said softly. You told me never to come crawling to you. Please, Dad said, his voice cracking. We were wrong. We were misled. George told us everything was fine. He showed us statements. He said the money was doubling. He printed those statements on a laser printer at the library, Dad, I said. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the thick black binder I had compiled. The collapse. I slid it across the polished wood desk toward them. What is this? Mom asked, trembling. Open it. She opened the binder. The first page was the forensic accounting summary. The second was a list of the crypto losses. The third was a copy of the credit card applications in Dad's name, signed with a forgery of his signature. He didn't invest your money, I said, my voice clinical, detached. He gambled it. He ate it. He drank it. He spent $450,000 in 3 years, and when that ran out, he stole your identity to keep the party going. Dad flipped through the pages, his hands shaking so hard he nearly ripped the paper. He stared at the credit card statements. Liquor store, DraftKings, Club Vixen. No, Dad moaned, a sound of pure animal pain. No, he's a good boy. He's just in trouble. He wouldn't do this to us. He loves us. He loves your money, I corrected, and now that it's gone, he's gone. But the house, Mom stammered, looking up at me with pleading eyes. The condo, he bought it. We have equity, right? We can sell it. I leaned forward, clasping my hands on the desk. This was the moment, the turning point. He never bought the condo, Mom. He was renting it. Renting? Dad looked up, confusion clouding his grief. No, we saw the deed. You saw a fake, I said. He was renting it, and he stopped paying rent 3 months ago. So, we have nothing, Mom whispered, the reality washed over her. The house is gone, the money is gone, the condo is gone. Yes, I said. Isabella, Dad said, leaning forward, his eyes desperate. You have to help us, you have this. He gestured around the office. You have space. You have a guest room. We just need a place to stay for a few weeks. Just until we find George and sort this out. He'll explain everything. It's just a misunderstanding. I stared at him. Even now, staring at the bank statements, staring at the proof of theft, he was holding onto the delusion. He still believed George would fix it. He still thought I was the resource to be used while waiting for the golden child to return. He abandoned you, I said sharply. He left you on the street, and you still think it's a misunderstanding. He's your brother, Mom cried out. Family helps family. You didn't help me, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. When I was building this business, eating ramen noodles and working 18 hours a day, where were you? You were selling my childhood home to fund his gambling addiction. You didn't call me for 3 years. You didn't even wish me a happy birthday. We're sorry, Dad yelled, slamming his hand on the armrest. We're sorry, okay? Is that what you want to hear? We made a mistake, but we are your parents, you owe us. I owe you nothing, I said. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. However, I said, my back to them, I am not George. I won't leave you on the street. I turned back to face them. I will help you, but not in the way you think. Thank God, Mom exhaled, grabbing her bag. When can we move in? You aren't moving in with me, I said, and you aren't going to find George to sort this out. You are going to find him to arrest him. Arrest him, Dad blanched. We can't call the police on our son. Then you can sleep under a bridge, I said, because those are my terms. I have the evidence to put him away for fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. If you want my help, financial help, legal help, you will sign the police report. You will press charges. You will help me hunt him down." "Isabella, we can't," Mom sobbed. "Then leave," I said, pointing to the door. "Go find him yourself, ask him for help." They looked at each other. They looked at the binder. They looked at the garbage bag of clothes that contained everything they owned in the world. Slowly, painfully, Dad nodded. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." "Good," I said. "Now let me show you one last thing." I opened the top drawer of my desk and pulled out a deed. "You wanted to know who evicted you," I said. "You wanted to know who the vicious landlord was." I slid the deed across the desk. It listed the owner of the building, Nemesis Holdings, LLC. And right below it, the signature of the managing member, Isabella Bennett. "I own the building," I said. "I've owned it for 2 years. I'm the one who evicted you." The silence in my office following my revelation was absolute. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the vacuum created when a worldview implodes. My father stared at the deed, his mouth slightly open, his eyes darting from my signature to the Nemesis Holdings letterhead. My mother just wept, a soft, keening sound that vibrated against the glass walls. "You," Alfred whispered, his voice trembling, "you evicted us, your own parents." "I evicted tenants who hadn't paid rent in 3 months," I said, my voice unyielding. "I evicted the people who sold my home to fund a con artist. I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it to wake you up. If I hadn't changed the locks, you would still be sitting in that condo waiting for George to call. You would still be defending him." "But why didn't you tell us?" Mom asked, wiping her eyes with a dirty sleeve. "Why did you let us suffer?" "Because you wouldn't have listened." I slammed my hand on the desk, the sharp crack making them jump. "If I had come to you 6 months ago and said George was stealing from you, you would have called me jealous. You would have cut me off again. You needed to hit the floor to realize who was actually holding you up." I stood up and walked around the desk, towering over them as they sat slumped in the guest chairs. "Now we have a choice. I know where George is." Dad looked up. "You do?" "He's at Aunt Linda's house," I said. "My pie tracked his phone. He's been there for 2 hours. He's doing exactly what he did to you, spinning a story, crying poverty, and trying to get her to sign a bridge loan to cover his temporary liquidity crisis. He knows Linda has a soft spot for him. He's going to drain her dry just like he did you." Alfred gripped the handle of his cane, his knuckles turning white. The denial was gone, replaced by a dark, simmering fury. The realization that his golden child viewed the family not as loved ones, but as a series of ATMs to be smashed open, had finally taken root. "Get up," Alfred said to Margaret. "Al." "Get up, Margaret. We're going to Linda's." The drive to Aunt Linda's estate was suffocating. My parents sat in the back of my SUV, silent as ghosts. I could see them in the rearview mirror, holding hands, looking out the window at the passing suburbs, the world they used to belong to, the world they had lost. When we pulled into Linda's long, gravel driveway, I saw George's rented Lux. Uri sedan parked haphazardly near the fountain. It was dusty, a symbol of his crumbling facade. I texted the contact I had arranged earlier, "We are here. Move in." I got out of the car and opened the back door for my parents. "Are you ready?" "Yes," Dad said. He stood up straighter than I had seen him in years. It was the posture of a man walking to his own execution, but doing it with dignity. We walked to the front door. I didn't knock. I pushed it open. We found them in the sunroom. Aunt Linda was sitting on her floral sofa, a checkbook open on her lap. George was kneeling beside her, holding her hand, his face a mask of practiced earnestness. "It's just the banks, Aunt Linda," George was saying, his voice smooth as oil. "They froze the assets because of the international transfer. As soon as the Dubai deal clears, I can pay you back with 20% interest. I just need $50,000 to keep the lawyers happy." "George," I said. He froze. He didn't turn around immediately. I saw his shoulders tense, a physical reaction to the sound of his doom approaching. Linda looked up, startled. "Isabella, Alfred, what on earth? You just barged in." George stood up slowly, turning to face us. When he saw Mom and Dad, a flash of genuine fear crossed his eyes, but he buried it instantly under a layer of bravado. "Mom, Dad," he forced a smile, spreading his arms. "I was just telling Aunt Linda about the situation. I told her how Isabella kicked you out. I was trying to get the money to get you a hotel suite." He looked at Linda. "See, I told you she was vicious. She evicted them, Linda, her own parents." Linda looked at me with the same disgust she had put in her letter years ago. "Isabella, is this true? You kicked your parents onto the street." "It's true," I said calmly. "You monster," Linda spat. "George told me you were jealous, but this is evil. George is the only one trying to help them." "Tell her, Dad," I said, looking at my father. The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. George's eyes darted between his parents, his smile faltering. "Dad," George said, his voice straining, tell her how she treated you." Alfred stepped forward. He limped slightly, relying on the cane, but his eyes were locked on his son. "She treated us," Alfred said, his voice low and raspy, "better than we deserved." George took a step back. "What, Dad, you're confused, the stress." "I am not confused," Alfred roared, the volume returning to his voice for the first time in months. "I am finally seeing clearly. You stole it all, George, the house money, the retirement. You took out credit cards in my name. You forged my signature." "That's a lie," George screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She's brainwashing you. She's making this up." "I saw the statements, George," Mom said, her voice small but steady. She stepped up beside Dad. "I saw the gambling debts. I saw the liquor stores. You told us you were investing. You told us we were safe." "I was trying to win it back," George cracked, the facade shattering. "I was going to fix it. I just needed more time. If you hadn't come here and ruined it, Linda was going to give me the capital to win it all back." "Win it back," Linda whispered, the pen dropping from her hand. "George, you said it was a tech startup." "It's all a gamble," George yelled, his face turning an ugly shade of red. "Life is a gamble, and I would have won if you people didn't keep dragging me down. I deserve that money. I'm the one with the vision. You," he pointed at Dad, "you were a factory worker. You're a nobody. I was meant to be something." "You're a thief," I said. George lunged at me. It was a desperate, flailing motion, fueled by panic. But he never reached me. The front door burst open behind us. "Police, stay where you are." 2 officers strode into the sunroom, followed by a detective I had been speaking with for weeks. George froze, his hands raised halfway to my throat. "George Bennett," the detective asked. "This is a mistake," George stammered, backing away until he hit the glass wall of the sunroom. "It's a family dispute. You can't be here." "We have a warrant for your arrest," the detective said, pulling out handcuffs. "Fraud, identity theft, and forgery. And thanks to your sister providing the location, we finally caught up with you." The officers grabbed George. He didn't fight, he just collapsed, sobbing. It wasn't a cry of remorse, it was the cry of a child who had finally been told no. "Mom, Dad," he screamed as they dragged him toward the door. "Don't let them take me. Tell them it was a gift. Tell them I had permission. Please, I'm your son." Dad watched him go. He didn't look away. Tears streamed down his face, but he didn't move to stop them. He stood like a statue, watching his legacy be hauled away in handcuffs. "I have no son," Alfred whispered. "When the squad came." Our doors slammed shut outside. The silence in the room was heavy enough to crush us. Aunt Linda looked at me, then at the checkbook on her lap. She looked pale. "Isabella, I didn't know." "You didn't ask," I said. "You just assumed the worst of me because it was easier than admitting your favorite nephew was a predator." I turned to my parents. They looked shattered, 2 people standing in the ruins of their lives. "Come on," I said gently. "Let's go." The legal process was slow, grinding, and humiliating. My parents had to sit in depositions and admit, on public record, how easily they had been duped. They had to review every forged check, every credit card statement, every lie. It aged them 10 years and 10 months. George pleaded guilty. He had no choice. The evidence I had compiled was bulletproof. He was sentenced to 5 years in state prison for fraud and elder abuse. I didn't go to the sentencing. I didn't need to see him in an orange jumpsuit to know I had won. I knew I had won because my phone stopped ringing with his demands. But the real challenge wasn't the court case. It was what to do with Alfred and Margaret. They were destitute. George had decimated their credit, drained their savings, and the eviction was on their record. They were unrentable. A week after George's arrest, I sat them down in my office again. "I found a place," I said, sliding a brochure across the desk. It was a small, neat apartment complex 2 towns over. It was a senior living community, income restricted, simple, quiet. "It's a 1-bedroom," I said. "It's clean, it has a shuttle to the grocery store, and it's safe." "How much is it?" Dad asked, looking at his hands. Social Security is all we have left, the garnishments for the debt George left us." "I bought the unit," I said. They looked up shocked. "I bought it through the LLC," I clarified. "You will live there rent-free. You will pay for your own utilities and food. I will handle the HOA fees and the property taxes." "Isabella," Mom choked out, "we don't deserve this. After everything we said, everything we did." "No," I said honestly. "You don't. You were terrible parents to me when I needed you most. You chose a fantasy over your own daughter." I let the words hang there. I wasn't going to sugarcoat it. I wasn't going to offer false forgiveness. "But," I continued, "I am not going to let you be homeless. That is the difference between me and George. He used you. I will sustain you. But things are going to be different." "Anything," Dad said. "We'll do anything." "You won't ask me for money," I listed. "You won't guilt-trip me about visiting. I will come when I want to come, and we are never, ever going to talk about George again. To me, he doesn't exist. If you want to visit him in prison, you take the bus. Do you understand?" "We understand," Dad said softly. "Thank you, Isabella, thank you." The day they moved in, I helped them unpack. It was a humble life compared to the Victorian farmhouse they had sold, but it was theirs. As I was leaving, walking toward my car, Dad called out to me. "Isabella." I turned. He was standing on the small concrete porch, leaning on his cane. "You were right," he said. The words seemed to cost him a great deal of effort. "About the house, about the roof, about everything. You were the one who built things, we were just lucky to have you, and we threw it away." "Yes," I said, "you did." "I'm sorry," he said. "I know that doesn't fix it, but I am sorry." I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt a weight lift off my chest. It wasn't the warm, fuzzy reconciliation of a movie. It was the cold, hard piece of reality. They knew who I was now. They respected me, not because they loved me, but because I was the only thing standing between them and the abyss. And strangely, that was enough. "I know, Dad," I said. "I'll see you at Thanksgiving." I got into my car, the car I had bought with my own money, earned from my own business, and drove away. I didn't look back at the rearview mirror. I looked forward, at the road stretching out ahead of me, clear and open. I had lost my family home, and I had lost the brother I thought I knew. But in the fire of that betrayal, I had forged something unbreakable: myself. And as I merged onto the highway, watching the skyline of the city I helped design rise in the distance, I smiled. I didn't need their inheritance. I was my own legacy.